So I first want to welcome everyone to CircleCI and WhiteSource's webinar today. And today we're going to show off all the cool stuff WhiteSource is doing with CircleCI orbs. But before that, let's do a couple of intros and run through the agenda, and then we'll get started. So my name is Angel Rivera. I'm a developer advocate for CircleCI. And just wanted to throw this up here. If you want to reach out to me after the event or the session, my Twitter handle is @punkdata. It's the best way to get a hold of me these days. So if you need any questions answered or you just want to hang out and talk about technology, I'm all about it. So just hit me up on Twitter @punkdata. And then I want to also introduce my co-host today. Her name is Shiri from WhiteSource. So Shiri, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar, and thanks, Angel. So my name is Shiri Ivtzan, and I'm a product manager here at WhiteSource.
Great, thanks, Shiri. So here's the agenda. Real quickly, we're going to talk about CircleCI and WhiteSource and what the two companies are. And then I'm going to introduce CircleCI orbs for the folks that don't know what those are. And then the rest of it, I'm going to turn it over to Shiri so that she can go through her presentation. I'm looking forward to seeing this presentation, and the demo looks pretty exciting. And at the end, we're going to do a Q&A session. So if you have any questions throughout, the talk or the webinar, go ahead and to the bottom of the Zoom client, there's a Q&A button. And go ahead and push that and then put your questions in there so that we can monitor that and then also answer any of those questions that are in there for you at the end. So yeah, next, a little bit about CircleCI. CircleCI is a continuous integration and continuous delivery deployment platform. And essentially what we do is enable developers to build, test, and deploy their code using automation. One of the cool features that or benefits from CircleCI that I really enjoy as a developer is the faster feedback loops, meaning I know when my code is broken and I'm able to fix it as soon as possible, right? So I can move on to building either new features or just doing other things, right, for my organization and improving the software. CircleCI has been around since 2011. We are I would say, global remote company. So we're headquartered in San Francisco, and I'd say probably half of our employees are stationed there in San Francisco. The rest are scattered throughout the globe remotely. So we have a pretty nice diverse group of people and engineers and other folks working throughout the world. Also, the last thing I want to mention about Circle is we are hiring. So if anything you hear today sounds awesome and you are super interested in maybe joining the team, check out our board.greenhouse.io/CircleCI site. You can go there, check out the jobs. If you see something that you are interested in that's not there, hit me up on Twitter again and see if I can get you connected to the right people. So now we're going to talk about orbs. Orbs essentially are reusable, shareable CircleCI configurations. And what that means is, we built a feature here so that it just makes developers' lives easier. They can manage their configuration syntax a lot easier. And they can also, shorten the amount of syntax that's required in the CircleCI configuration. And I'll show you that in the next slide, please. Right. Oh, so orbs are, if you're familiar with CircleCI and the configuration, you can take a look to the left side here. That's just some syntax for a very simple orb. But as you can see here, all the elements, critical elements for an orb are listed. Right now, the elements that comprise an orb are commands, executors, and jobs. And the power that we bring to the orb configuration is the ability to parameterize certain values, right, within your builds. So that gives it a nice fluid and dynamic touch. Next slide, please. Right, and here's an example of a regular CircleCI configuration. You can see it's about 68 lines of YAML. which is the language that we use or the syntax that we use within our configurations. And there's a lot of repeat there, right? There's a lot of code or syntax that's repeated. And one more slide forward, please. Here's what that code looks like using an orb, right? So as you can see, we've encapsulated a lot of that functionality so that we don't repeat ourselves within the syntax. It's really important that we have some clean, concise configuration so that other folks can go ahead and behind us and see what's going on. And it's really easy for them to kind of actually see what the pipeline looks like. And then also, if they need to modify, they can modify that orb, and then it'll be propagated. That new version would propagate it across all of your configurations by simply just declaring that. As you can see there in line 2 there, the orbs key, that's where you would define the orb that you intend to use. So that's orbs in a really quick nutshell. A lot of our partners are building orbs because they realize that our CircleCI users use a lot of their tools. So we decided to reach out to a lot of the well-known and not so well-known tools, right, out there. But basically what we're trying to encourage our partners is to build orbs and support the orbs so that their users can build on CircleCI and use their tools seamlessly and easily, right? So if you're a partner or a startup out there and you want to build your own orb, you can do that too. You can hit me up afterwards and we can talk about how to do that. I think that's it for me, Shiri. So I'd like to turn it over to Shiri now so she can do her portion of the webinar. So take it away, Shiri.
Thank you, Angel. So yeah, I think that was a great summary about orbs. As a user, I can tell you that it really makes life a lot easier. And we'll see that towards the end of the presentation. But before that, so I'm a product manager at WhiteSource, as I already mentioned. And here at WhiteSource, we're an open source management company, basically. And we'll discuss more about WhiteSource later. But what we actually did last year is we performed a survey with more than 600 developers around the world to understand better about how they actually use open source. Because open source is actually one of the biggest revolutions in the last, I think, 10 years maybe. So there are, as any new technology or not so new technology, there are a lot of challenges. So we decided to investigate it and to understand what are the real challenges. So first of all, we see security as probably the biggest challenge for almost every developer and development manager that we actually discussed with mentioned this security issue. And we see that all around. So basically here we see in 2017, which is the year of when we performed the survey, there were a lot more vulnerabilities, and this number keeps rising over the years. We now just gathered the numbers from 2018. It looks quite the same, even worse than last year. So keeps rising as more and more people and more users take advantage of open source. The hackers also take advantage of that. So basically, we see, as we mentioned, more and more developers are using open source. More than 96% of the developers are actually using open source in their day-to-day jobs. And as I mentioned, the hackers or the people that want to hurt, and exploit security vulnerabilities know this number as well. So sometimes, as we have more and more people using open source, it becomes easier for hackers to actually exploit the code. It really depends on the specific repository and on the maintainers of this repository, but it can be very easy to actually put a security vulnerability in an open source repository, and we'll see that in a second. Basically, so not all is bad. There are about 8%, 7.5% of all open source projects that are vulnerable. But when we look at the top 100 projects, we see that around 32% are actually vulnerable. So again, the hackers know where to find where all the users are, and they know where to find it. Another important number is that about 97% of the reported vulnerabilities have at least one suggested fix. So these are good news, right? Because if you are users, you are developers, you want to actually, handle this challenge and fix open source vulnerabilities, you really have very easy ways to do it. So all the vulnerabilities that are published in the NVD and other databases, most of them already have a fix, and the fix will usually be either change something in the configuration, as we will see soon, or upgrade to a later version. And the upgrade thing about software is very important, actually, because as I mentioned, a lot of hackers actually take advantage of already published vulnerabilities that already have a fix in later versions. So it's really important to keep our versions always up to date. And of course, WhiteSource can help with that. So as I mentioned the NVD as one of the databases that stores all the security vulnerabilities and also the fixes. So about 86% of the vulnerabilities actually appear within the NVD as a CVE and other databases. Specifically for WhiteSource, we gather around all the security vulnerabilities from more than 12 different security databases. So this is another important thing. Don't use only one database. It's really important to use more than one and to actually gather all the security vulnerabilities. Now, some of the latest news here, what I actually did is I took 3 main groups of security vulnerabilities. So the first one is integrity. Here we can see code execution flow, specifically in Apache Struts, that was revealed, I think it was last year around August. So the idea here with integrity is that someone is actually able to run code, run remotely, any type of code, and actually change what my users see, and maybe even steal data. The next one is actually availability. So this is an example for Jenkins, and we see a lot of these for Bitcoin miners actually using performance, so CPU resources for actually mining Bitcoin or other different coins. So it's very dangerous as well. We don't want people to use our software, our hardware to do that. And the last one is actually the security protection one. So this one is for Kubernetes, privilege escalation flow, which actually means that a regular user can get very high privilege within Kubernetes, and again, do all sorts of things. And of course, the security protection is probably the more severe one, right? Because someone can get access to data, maybe steal credit cards, but also steal private information, and we don't want that to happen within our software, of course. So this is what WhiteSource is here for. So our vision is actually to empower businesses to use open source software in a better way. So this means, as we investigated, there are a lot of challenges in open source. Specifically in this webinar, we are discussing security, but of course there are various challenges. It's not just security. It's also the licensing and the quality of the software. So what WhiteSource actually tries to do is both to secure, but also help on the other challenges and actually help organizations track the way they use open source and give all kinds of alerts and workflows and policies to use the open source components in a better way. So the next one is security. So as we mentioned, one of the biggest challenges for open source. And what we believe, of course, is as everyone shift left, the typical model would be usually to find these kind of security vulnerabilities within testing or maybe within the build steps sometimes. What we actually say is once you gather the requirements, once you investigate which open source component to use, that would already be the right time to take security into account. So what this actually means is that WhiteSource gives you various tools to test for security very, very early in the pipeline, because as mentioned here, the cost of fixing security, but both quality and functionality issues rises significantly as we go through the development and the cycle is actually on the right side. So that's what we believe. And as we mentioned, scanning the code. So what does it actually mean? What does it actually mean to scan the code? So there are, as I mentioned, various databases of security vulnerabilities and of software, open source software. And what WhiteSource actually does, and other similar tools also, we actually identify the digital signature of your specific file, and we compare it with other digital signatures in the database. So that way we are not exposed to the code, we just know what the digital signature is, and that's how we find the security vulnerabilities that you have in the code. This is a very high level explanation, of course, but this is the way we do it. So as I mentioned, within the coding, so as me, for example, as a developer, I want to start writing a specific, I have a specific task, I need to write a specific component. The first challenge is actually to choose the right component. So really from the early stages, I need to choose something that makes sense both in terms of the functionality. So I need to choose an open source component that does whatever I need in terms of functionality. I need to choose something that is maintained, of course. I don't want to choose something that was not maintained recently. And I also need to choose something that doesn't have a lot of security vulnerabilities. And of course, the licensing, as we mentioned, I need to choose something that has the right license for what my organization actually needs. So this is the first challenge. The next one, and what we actually provide, is automatically opening pull requests for patches. So this means that, for example, if I have a GitHub repository, as I will show soon, and I have an old version, or I have a version with vulnerability, I can automatically open pull requests for patches. I can automatically open pull requests for higher version that already exists. And as we mentioned, this is one of the most important things. Always keep your versions up to date. The next one is to restrict merges if vulnerabilities exist. So again, this actually depends on the maturity level of the organization. But if you're all into DevOps and DevSecOps, this is one of the best things to do. So we do not allow, in our organization, for example, we do not allow any merges to the master branch if there are security vulnerabilities within the code. So we check it actually on every commit, on every push. This is a very important thing, of course. And the next thing, of course, is the build step, which we will discuss and show a demo in a second. But the most important thing is to detect open source vulnerabilities while running the build. And another thing that you can do, of course, is you can fail builds based on policies. So for example, I can say I want to fail the build if I have high security vulnerabilities. So it makes sense to think about it. In the build step, we usually test the software. So if you already test for functionality and you fail builds once there is a failure or there is a bug or something that doesn't go well, it's the same thing exactly with vulnerabilities. And that's what we actually recommend as a best practice. Great. So now to the orb, probably the most interesting thing here. So this is an example of the orb, and I'm going to show it live in a second. So the orb actually consists of our unified agent. So the agent that actually scans the code, that's what wrapped into the Docker image that we have there. And then, of course, as WhiteSource users, you will have API keys. You will know exactly which directory you want to scan, and you have all the defaults here in the documentation, of course, and the config file. So, of course, it makes more sense to actually see it live. So let's see it right now. So the first thing that I wanted to show is the the CircleCI orb registry where you can find all the orbs. So this is actually the WhiteSource orb. And this is sort of the quick start guide. And we also have the parameters, as I mentioned. Now, if I go to my GitHub repository, and this is just an example, of course, I picked just a random repository. And what I have here is the .circleci with the config.yaml. And I have a very simple orb. It's very simple config YAML file. It only consists of WhiteSource orb, basically. And another important thing is, of course, the API key. So here you have it as a clear text. But another thing that you can do in CircleCI is go to the settings. And in terms of the context, you can also create a WhiteSource context. And then you can specify a specific API token, which you can use in your GitHub repository. So it's really up to you how you want to use it. That's also a possibility. Now, another important thing that I wanted to show is actually the WhiteSource config file. So the WhiteSource config file, if you're already WhiteSource users, you probably know this file. This file consists of many configurations and different parameters of specifically which resolvers to use. So in this example, I'm using mostly NPM, and I have some include patterns as well. Of course, I have to put my project name. So I put my project name as orb_scan. This will be my project today. And I can also see it in WhiteSource. So what I can actually do now is I can go to my repository. For example, I can just change the README file. So add something, then commit the change. And the CircleCI build, of course, will run automatically. So we will see it inside CircleCI. And we can also see it within WhiteSource. So let's go back to my jobs. And we can see that the job is running. If we go to WhiteSource, so for those of you who are not familiar with the WhiteSource portal, it's probably quite overwhelming to see it now, but you basically have all the top alerts. So we can see that my project, orb_scan, is already here. Okay, so we can look at the specific build, and we can see also the unified agent log. So I can see all my parameters, everything that went well or didn't go well, and I can also see the URL for the specific WhiteSource project, which is what I've opened here. And now you can see that it already alerts me. So there are no security vulnerabilities here. We will add them soon, don't worry. But we have three new versions. So WhiteSource actually recommends us to upgrade to a newer version. And below that, you can also see the libraries that were detected in here. So now the next thing would probably be to add a vulnerability to see that WhiteSource actually identifies the vulnerabilities. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add an index.html file. And what I actually have here is a code that I prepared before, which has a vulnerability in it. So what I actually did is just committed this file, this index.html file. And of course, now my CircleCI build will run, and WhiteSource will identify the vulnerability. So we can see that this is currently running. And we can also see, as we go along, all the WhiteSource configurations. And now if we go back to the home, and we can go back to the project, we can actually see new vulnerability detected. So there are quite few new vulnerabilities detected here, as you can see. So this is the specific library that is vulnerable, and we can see few vulnerability IDs here. And on each CVE, we can actually see all the details along with the suggested fix. Okay, so just the suggested fix here, for example, says replace some specific files that you have. Okay, so, and there is also a commit link where I can see the specific details of that vulnerability and of that fix. And I can also look at the CVE within the NVD to find out, for example, all the parameters, all the details. I can see the CVSS score and the date where it was actually reported. So now the next thing would be to actually fix the vulnerability, right? So in this example, I can just go ahead and, for example, delete this file. And of course, a scan will happen again, and the vulnerability will be eliminated from my WhiteSource project. And of course, I can always view the history. So I can always view what was fixed and what was handled before that. So this is the general notion of what WhiteSource orb does. And I hope that if you're using WhiteSource, you're already using this. And if you're not using this already, so be sure to do it and to deploy this. And that's basically it, I guess. If we have, so I guess, let's go back to the presentation. So I guess it's now time for our Q&A session. So let's see if we have any questions. And by the way, if you have any specific questions about what we saw today or about anything that I presented or that Angel presented today, so feel free to ask any questions.
Yeah, I'm looking at our Q&A queue. I don't see anything yet.
Yeah.
I see some folks though. Let's
Angel, do you have any questions?
I do. So well, first I want to say thank you for that presentation. It was really cool. I learned a lot today about WhiteSource and actually about vulnerabilities. I keep up on, on that stuff myself personally as a developer. So it's really important to be able to know when your code is, has issues, especially from upstream, the dependencies and libraries. I guess my question is there, and I'm assuming yes, but is there a capability that WhiteSource has to deliver a what we call software bill of materials? So generally, in today's modern world, a lot of organizations require that developers provide the security teams and such with a full listing of all of the software that a certain application uses. Is there a capability like that?
Yes, of course. So by default, when you scan a specific library or a specific project, we show like the bill of material for everything that you have within that project. So all the libraries, all the open source components, all of that will be listed. And of course, you can exclude things from being scanned. So for example, if you have two projects and you only want one of them to be scanned, you can also do that. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we have one question.
Yeah, I'll let you take that. Go for it.
So the question is, will WhiteSource scan for vulnerabilities in other orbs? So that's actually a very good question. WhiteSource is able today to scan any Docker image. And orbs are basically Docker images. So yes, WhiteSource can scan any other orbs. We do that using our unified agent. So today we have the option of scanning Docker images from any local machine. So if you store these images within CircleCI or within other Docker registry, we can scan it. And we can also automatically integrate with AWS ECR, with Azure Container Registry, with Google Container Registry, and with Artifactory. So if you're storing the images there, you can also scan them. So yeah. Yeah. Oh, and we have another one. So I guess that one is for you, or?
Oh, great. I get to answer. Cool. So the question is, how secure is CircleCI's pipeline by default? Can hackers, are hackers able to crack my code in the pipeline? We take security very seriously, right? CircleCI, we understand that we are running our customers and our users and our developers and our community's code, right, in our infrastructure. So we take it very, very, very seriously. One of the ways that we leverage that is we have layers of security within the platform. So not only are your, if you're talking about, like, let's say API keys and secrets, like Shiri had showed us, we definitely keep those under lock and key. And again, on multiple levels of encryption. So at rest, in flight, right, the information is locked down pretty damn tight. One of the other things I wanted to mention about, I guess, CircleCI's security, we recently were approved in the United States government. We have this, they have this basically white list of applications that vendors or that the federal government can buy from. Right? So the list is called FedRAMP. So we're authorized on that. So the U.S. government has basically authorized us, right, to sell our software to government agencies within the United States. So that's a pretty high bar of security. And again, we take it very seriously. We definitely enacted all the GDPR stuff as well. So I hope that answers your question. We do take it very seriously, and it's at the top of our list. Guess
yeah. Guess no more questions.
No more questions, unless anyone has a last minute one, get it in. Otherwise, we're gonna end this. Okay. I think going once, going twice. I don't see any more. Do you have any questions, Shiri, for me? Or
no, I think it was very, very clear.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's it. I would like to thank everyone for attending. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Shiri. I'm not sure if you do tweets or whatever, Shiri, but we'll just reach out to me and I'll get you in touch with the folks at WhiteSource. Oh wait, we have a question. It looks like, maybe in the chat. Oh wait, there are. Oh, here's a question. We'll take it. There's more questions. Awesome. So I'll get the one from the chat and I'll read it out. Okay, here we go. So is it possible to use CircleCI with a WhiteSource on-prem installation? I think you should probably take that one, Shane.
Yeah. So it's definitely possible because it uses the unified agent that you already have. And of course, if you're using CircleCI, so you can use also the WhiteSource orb. So the answer is yes.
Awesome. And then there's another one. I think this might be for you, but I'll read it for you. Is there any in-build code we can add to improve security?
So basically, we do have some tools there are some tools that scan the code in real time, but in terms of best practices, I would guess what this question is like best practices on how to write secure code. So there are a lot of best practices in terms of how to write secure code, and specifically in open source, I think the most important thing is to choose the resources in the right way. So basically to choose the components that you use in the right way, and also to use the right methods. So for example, another tool by WhiteSource is called effective usage analysis. And this code actually helps you to prioritize the vulnerabilities in your code by actually understanding which methods are called from your proprietary code to the open source code. So you have like the entire open source code, which methods are actually being called. And then we analyze and understand whether these specific methods are vulnerable or not. So this can be, for example, a very quick way to understand and prioritize the vulnerabilities in the code. But in terms of best practices, so yes, of course, there are best practices. Specifically, of course, our expertise is open source. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds pretty amazing. I wish I would have had that 10 years ago. The modern day, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm not seeing any more new stuff coming across. So I think we'll just end it. Sound good, Shiri?
Yeah,
Unless
thanks
anyone,
a lot. It
yeah,
was a pleasure speaking to you, and thanks a lot for everyone who joined this webinar. It was
definitely.
great.
Yeah, it was a great presentation. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
hopefully we'll get another one done soon, right?
Yeah, right.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you,
All right.
Shiri. And thanks. Oh, wait, we got one more. Do
Oh,
you want to answer? Yeah.
dashboard.
Okay, so there's two questions. All right, so let's take, is there any dashboard we can see real resource usage inside CircleCI? I guess that's my wheelhouse. Real resource usage. I'm assuming you're asking about the actual build resources that we run the jobs on. I right now there is none. What you saw Shiri demoing, the UI is literally what you as the user would use to view and manage your builds. So I would say no, but there is a everything's that you use is tracked, so you can get I guess the usage. The more, yeah, I guess if you're talking about the resources themselves, what the actual code is running on or the jobs are running on, the answer would be no. But yes, if you're looking for like stats on how much build time and what kind of resources you were building on, then there will be there will be some information inside of the UI for sure. And if you don't see it, ping me and we'll get you the right answer, or make sure we connect you to the right resources that you're looking for as far as within the UI. And then there's another question here. Is there a list of webinars you offer that I can sign up to? Why, yes, there are. We have a YouTube channel. I believe if you signed up for this, you will get an email that will, tell you where you can find this webinar so that you can view it later or show it off to your coworkers and such. But yes, we do have that. And again, if you want, you can hit me on Twitter, or my email is angel@circleci.com. So you can actually email me as well, and I can help you find those resources. All right. I think we are done with the question. Oh, wait. No? Okay, yeah. I think we're good. So I'm going to call it a day. Thank you again, Shiri, for
Thank you.
staying up super late. I know it's like 9 o'clock over there where you're at. And yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Really good presentation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.